today is items of interest from the commissioners, followed by, are you going to be giving a report,
A
Deborah?
real quick announcement.
Then we will go over the consent agenda. That will be followed by our Task 5 Community Involvement Program, which is a hearing and a recommendation. If you're here for that hearing, please fill out a form in the back of the room and bring them up to Julie. That item will then be followed by Title 17 TDM Street Vacations Work Session and Recommendation, and our goal is to adjourn at 4. So are there any items of interest? Nope? Okay, Deborah?
So I want to remind you all that tomorrow's a very big day. City Council will be taking its final vote on the comprehensive plan tomorrow at 2 p.m. in City Council chambers. So we would love for any or all of you to join us if you want to be there for that huge milestone vote. I also want to mention just preceding the 2 p.m. time certain is a 1:30 celebration in the atrium of City Hall, sponsored by Commissioner Novick and the Anti-Displacement Coalition. So that's a celebration to mark the adoption of the Anti-Displacement Coalition's recommendations. So that will be just before City Council, and then the vote happens at 2 o'clock. So it's kind of an exciting day for everybody.
Thank you. And then on the consent agenda, we have consideration of the minutes from May 17th and 24th. And then we also have the right-of-way 8051 vacation of unnamed alley between North Midway Avenue and North Columbia Boulevard. Do you have a question? Look like you're getting ready to talk.
I was going to
Make a motion?
I was going to make a motion.
Awesome.
If that's,
Just see
someone
another
had a,
movement in the corner of my eye. Go for it.
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Andre. Okay, so next item is Task 5 Community Involvement Program. This is a hearing and a recommendation. As a reminder, if you're here to testify, please fill out a form in the back of the room and then bring them up to Julie. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Wright, and I'm a Community Information and Outreach Representative at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And you guys saw me in May, so I'm just coming back to give you a quick refresh on the Community Involvement Program to open the hearing. So, Community Involvement Program is an early implementation project of the Comprehensive Plan, so it's going to bundle up with all the other early implementation projects to go forward to Council. And you are here. So the elements of the Community Involvement Program are a manual, the first draft of which is included in the document, a Community Involvement Committee to be established to take on the role of oversight of community involvement that the Planning and Sustainability Commission currently holds, the continuation of existing legislative requirements. We still will have to follow state law and city law and federal law. Programmatic commitments, which is again building on what we already do and just formalizing and streamlining it and adding on new practices and just investing in a community involvement program that's robust. And I just wanted to revisit the reason for this project in the first place is comprehensive plan policies related to community involvement. So the current comprehensive plan, and I played this slide a little bit for laughs when I was here in May, and I wanted to come back to it and really underline the fact that this is really important, that we're going from our current comprehensive plan's requirements for goals and policies, and we're going to a lot more requirements for goals and policies. And I think, you know, it can kind of feel like we're just doing this because we like to say too many words and you know, make things bigger. But well, I can't say that we don't like to use a lot of words. I would also say that this is here because Portlanders really care about community involvement, and Portlanders really care about equity and transparency and all the things that make up a good community involvement program that is meaningful. And this is the product of a lot of work and a lot of conversations and listening and talking to a lot of people over the years. And this program is intended to kind of build the structure that we can move forward and really get some momentum on working toward these goals and policies that are important. So I just wanted to revisit that. And then this program would support staff to work toward all the Chapter 2 policies and also specifically implement these policies that are required in the comprehensive plan, the new comprehensive plan. And with that, the recommendation that we're hoping that you'll make today is to recommend the Community Involvement Program to City Council, including the proposed changes in Title 33. And that is all that I have.
Are there any questions for Sarah? Okay, with that, we'll begin the hearing. Again, just a reminder, if you're here to testify, please fill out a form and bring it up to Julie here. Let's begin with Dixie Johnston and David Johnston. We're going to be limiting testimony to 2 minutes, and so I will be reminding you at 2 minutes to complete your sentence.
Hi, I'm Dixie Johnston. Can you hear me all right? I am a member of the Collinsview Neighborhood Association, and I've been involved with community involvement actions for 21 years, and especially the last 16 years. I think what the Bureau of Planning has done is a remarkable job on this document, but it's still vague language and needs more specificity. My first most important word for my testimony is the word context. And I'm hoping as they look into this, they not only look at only on page 15, which is the gut of what Dave and I are talking about, the definitions, 3.96060. My suggestion is that 060 is only 1 page, but 396, which is in the city charter, is 3 pages long. I'd like to see the whole context put together. It might help us look at that definition more carefully. There's so many other things that need to be looked at in the existing codes that are already there. So I just thought I'd let you know that's very important. Also, Laura Campus is going to be speaking pretty soon, and I hope you listen to her testimony. And I put my testimony in writing with more detail. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Dave Johnston. My letterhead says Dave. There should be copies of a letter distributed to you, although I didn't have enough to go around to everyone. The fact that Dixie and I are testifying separately today and wrote separate letters shouldn't mean we don't agree with each other. It just happened that our own activities limited our ability to coordinate real closely. I'm the land use chair of Collinsview Neighborhood Association, although they haven't voted on what I'm about to say, so they tell me I don't dare say it's their official position. Although they've submitted similar things with regard to the comprehensive plan. I wanted to focus on one small item in the proposed involvement program, although I think it's a very important one, and that's the role of neighborhood associations. And as we look at definitions of our recognized associations in 33.910 of the proposed draft, it deletes the words neighborhood association from the wording. I think there's good reason to keep neighborhood associations specifically listed. True, the city charter talks about neighborhood associations, requires them to be recognized if they meet certain requirements, and this proposed code would not overrule that. But to keep the awareness of this up, I've suggested some wording that could be inserted there to ensure that we remember neighborhood associations in the charter should be recognized. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions, Fred? No, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Gary has a question.
Yes, David, the language is currently written. Did I hear you correctly that it does include neighborhood associations, but you would just prefer to be more explicit to say the words neighborhood association?
It does. Do you have a copy of my letter? Probably, perhaps not. The current one does mention neighborhood associations. The proposed one does not, and just talks in terms of organizations recognized by the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. Since neighborhood associations are specifically required in the city charter, it seems appropriate to bring them forward to this program to ensure that everybody involved is aware of their status. And obviously, I favor them. I think they're very valuable to us.
Okay, thank you.
Next, Laura Campos, Greg Greenway, and Courtney Duke. If there's anybody else who's here to testify, please fill out a form and hand it to Julie.
I'm not as prepared as I usually am. I have to make my apologies. I'm a Native American elder. Hi, Maggie. Good to see you. And we were really involved at last Sunday at Willamette Park. We had a canoe
Excuse me,
blessing and naming
could you
ceremony.
quickly speak your name for the record?
My name is Laura Campos.
Thank you, Laura.
I live at 3419 Southwest First Avenue. I sit on the board of the South Portland, formerly Corbett Twilliger Lair Hill Neighborhood Association, but I am not only representing myself and my own views. I've had a long-term, commitment to the city, starting in the 70s, working for Goldschmidt, and one of the documents that I produced was my little history of the Planning Commission. But one of the things that was really important to me was community involvement. But my concern with this current document is that it seems to water down the central role that neighborhood associations have. I understand when Potter was mayor, he had I don't question his commitment to ending racism. I've had a similar commitment. But I do question the means. I think that by creating DCLs and sort of spreading out the responsibilities for representing our citizens, that in some ways it can compromise what our intended goal is. Currently, neighborhood associations have not done a good job representing people of color, and there needs to be more to involve people. Part of it is structural because it's based on home ownership, and a lot of people of color do not own homes, and that's something which I think you certainly got people's attention. Sweeney, our district coalition, just started a equity standing committee, so we're on the same level as land use transportation. This last Sunday, I think, was evidence of what we can do as a neighborhood association. And I have a list here of 15 meetings that I personally attended, trying to get, I was approached as an elder by the Canoe Journey, and I've been involved with them for 3 years out of NAIA, to use Willamette Park. They had been practicing in Cathedral Park, and if any of you know, that's super fun. It's very toxic
that's
for
2
our
minutes.
families. And they wanted Willamette Park because it was clean and nice, and it was in my neighborhood. But I only had 3 weeks, and I thought, boy, that's cutting it close. If any of you get our newsletter from Sweeney, there is a whole article on page 11.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So, but we were the ones who got the park to waive the permit fees, and that's something neighborhood associations do.
Thank you, Laura. I think there may be questions for you, but let's get through the rest of the testimony if you don't mind staying. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Greenway. I'm here today on behalf of the Public Involvement Advisory Council, PIAC. As you know, likely from PIAC's previous testimony to this body and others, we have a long history, several years now, of a number of PIAC members working really closely and collaboratively with staff. And on both the development of Chapter 2, I was a member along with other PIAC members of the Policy Expert Group for Chapter 2, and then more recently on the Community Involvement Program. And our central message, we included some written testimony as well, but our central message is really that we strongly encourage you to move this process forward, including the proposed CIP to City Council. PIAC sees this as a major step forward for the city, something very positive, helps put the city in alignment with State Planning Goal 1, the vision of the Portland Plan, and the public involvement principles that were developed originally by PIAC and then adopted by City Council in 2010. And we think that Chapter 2, along with the Community Involvement Program that implements it, really represents a model for cities of Portland size, statewide certainly, but nationally as well. The other thing I think I'd say is that we really support that relationship, and we really appreciate the input and the feedback that was taken by staff, by Deborah, by Marty Stockton, who I saw walk in the room on Chapter 2, and then more recently with Sarah Wright on the Community Involvement Program. Our letter has, in addition to that strong support, some recommended clarifications and elaborations. I won't talk about all of them, but I'll just highlight 5 if I have that time. Number one is that we would like to see something explicit in the charge and scope regarding an assessment of the resources that are needed to carry out the community involvement program. That's explicit that should happen as part of the program, but we think that the community involvement or community involvement committee should have explicitly in its charter and its scope that responsibility to assess that need. Secondly, there's some language in there about liaisons from the CIC to the Office of Equity and I think to this body, the PSC, and we'd like to see the same thing to PIAC. We think that's a natural relationship to have a liaison between those two groups.
So Greg, that's 2 minutes.
That's
Do you,
2 minutes.
Have you given written testimony?
I have.
Summarize that?
It's all
Perfect.
in there.
Okay, thank you very much. Courtney?
Hi, I'm Courtney Duke with the Bureau of Transportation, and I am representing the Bureau of Transportation in my testimony. We've submitted written testimony as well that I think you just got. I think the main thing we'd like to say is, again, we also very much appreciate the work we've done very collaboratively with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, reiterating PIAC, starting with Marty Stockton, and really moving forward with Sarah Wright and the amazing work that she's done, and working with me and Francesca Patriccolo, our community involvement specialist. We really felt that PBOT's questions were answered and our input was received and incorporated, and we both on Chapter 2, which we are very supportive of, we have testified before, especially the expansion of the engagement and who we're engaging, as well as the work here into the CIP, Community Involvement Plan. So we really want to appreciate that and say thanks to that. We have we have a letter of support. We have some minor amendments in the CIP that are in the written testimony, mainly related to just clarifying legislative versus non-legislative projects and what would be under CIP. And of course, we would always get feedback from the city attorney and from Bureau of Planning and from all of you before we move forward on a lot of those. But we wanted a little bit more clarification of what might fit into this program and what might not. And also, Francesca put together a nice way of interacting still with the CIC on non-legislative projects. We kind of called it a Tier 1 and Tier 2. That's on the second attachment, where we could utilize the CIC as well as utilizing all of our existing public involvement committees and processes and programs that we already have at the Bureau of Planning, at Bureau of Transportation. So we submit that as some conversation. And again, we have talked about these with planning staff, and they've been supportive of these changes. We'd also like, which I think we forgot to put in our letter, but we also are concerned about the resources required for this program, both at the Bureau of Planning as well as the Bureau of Transportation, as well as possibly other bureaus around the city. So we would encourage you in maybe your letter or in your communication to City Council to make sure that there are financial resources available to make this a successful project. So that's it.
Thank you, Courtney. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a few. So I guess this could apply to anyone, but I'm particularly curious about your comments, Mr. Greenway. So some of the testimony we received said that that the plan leaves little room for community to establish their own goals and their own goals and objectives. Did you see that when you were evaluating the plan, or did PIAC generally think it was adequate? I mean, you had a voting process on the plan, correct?
PIAC itself?
Yes.
We did, although I note, it's sort of a technicality actually, that at our last meeting when we had the final letter proposed that we had half of our members there, and a quorum for us is half plus one. So we offered this as a testimony of the people there in attendance, but it was the month before that the whole body directed us to write such a letter. Mm-hmm. So back to your question, I think I think in general the framework is there to, and this is sort of thinking what I've heard from PIAC, is there to allow the community much more voice and influence over the process. And one of the responsibilities of the Community Involvement Committee is to help monitor projects to make sure that that's the case. That being said, there were a couple of our comments in here that emphasize opportunities to maybe make that clearer or to open up the scope for community influence. One of those, and we've heard this, was around the question of metrics, that the community, I think you can expect, is going to be very focused on what those metrics are. There's a clear evaluation role for the CIC, but what does that mean? And so to the extent that you could put either clarifying language in there or create an opportunity even possibly to work with the community in the development of metrics. I don't know how that plays out within the planning process or the further development of the CIP. But yes, we've heard that, and we think that the metrics could be clearer. And the other, we just kind of put a general comment in here, which I think speaks directly to us hearing the same things that you've heard, which is in the supporting text, it should be clear that the role of the CIC is not just to support staff and advise staff and sort of oversee staff and evaluate projects, which it is, but that it also should have a particular value to the community, that the CIC in its charge and scope should play that liaison role as well, and however it's elaborated in the program when it gets chartered, to make sure there's some opportunity and some actual explicit responsibility for the committee to have that value or be responsive in some way to the community as well, and give the community influence over the metrics, et cetera, and some of the other things the CIC is charged with.
And then I was also curious, how exactly is this plan watering down? I've heard two examples of how, or one example of how it waters down neighborhood associations. But I'm wondering how, I mean, what portion of that is just explicitly calling out neighborhood associations versus actually reducing resources, reducing power of a neighborhood association?
It's almost more of a question for BPS staff, but I think from our perspective at PBOT, both at looking at Chapter 2 and how it's written in this implementation, it doesn't change any resources. There's no change to what's being funded. That said, that doesn't mean there couldn't be additional resources to the non-neighborhood associations that we're trying to reach. That had come up, I think, at Planning Commission when we talked about Chapter 2, was how do we, if we're trying to engage additional communities and additional groups, our current neighborhood association program does have money from the city through ONI, and those other groups do also have some funding through I'm looking at Deborah because I can't remember the name of the DCL program. I think, again, from our perspective, Chapter 2 and then this program just really gives us more direction to expand our reach and again, get to underserved communities and engage additional folks that aren't necessarily in a traditional neighborhood association component. I have not seen anything that, to me, as a staff member or as a community member, dilutes it, but that it expands it. And again, that's what, as both an employee and as a member of the community, I am supportive of.
So I would like to hear Laura's comments on that.
Thanks for not excluding me. But I guess my concern, because I've been following this pretty much all my life, is that what I've noticed, at least within the last 10 years, is a rift has been caused, a division happening, where people in the DCLs really have been reluctant to even talk to neighborhood associations. And that was this whole canoe blessing, because it's a ceremony, and I'm Native. I saw this as a way to start to heal that rift. And what I'm bringing up is that not so much concerned about loss of resources or loss of power, but I'm concerned about it creating a division within our communities that's going to make it harder for us. I mean, recently, just on my board, we had new board members. We got a number of people, color, women. And I just see if we work with neighborhood associations, you know, and work within that process and make it better, that's the way to go. And to create additional groups takes away the unity. I think it's going to be harder for the average citizen to know which group to go to.
Is there not a risk of, if you don't include organizations of color or culturally specific organizations, that those folks actually won't participate in the neighborhood association at all, and thus won't be represented to the extent that they could be, particularly according to, I mean, if a neighborhood association, right, isn't culturally specific, isn't responsive as much to those needs or perspectives or backgrounds or communities, isn't there a risk that they're just alienated from the entire process?
I'm an optimist, and I believe in neighborhood associations, and I know we can change to meet whatever challenge is put before us, and I think we're the best vehicle to do it.
Any other questions? Deborah, could you clarify for me what DCL stands for?
Sure, I realize that we've been throwing that around. Diversity and Civic Leadership Partners, and that's a group of organizations. I think there are now 6 organizations in the city. Is that right? 6 that have funding through the Office of Neighborhood Involvement to do leadership development and to do some community organizing work. So they are. I can list 5. I can't list the 6th one, but it's Urban League, NEA, Center for Intercultural Organizing, Latino Network, and what did I just say? Urban League. ERCO, thank you. And there is a 6th that was added this year, and I'm afraid I can't remember.
6 is like a youth movement.
Right. I
youth
just can't think of what they're called.
leadership Something
Right.
or another.
And so through the comprehensive plan, earlier the Portland plan and then comprehensive plan outreach and engagement, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability worked with the diversity and civic leadership partners as well as the coalitions and neighborhood associations to broaden our outreach to include those organizations.
Thank you for explaining that. There's no questions? No? Next individual is Doug Klotz. This is the last reminder for anybody out there. If you'd like to testify, please fill out a form and bring it up to Julie.
Hi, I'm Doug Klotz. I was interested to hear Laura Campos' take on this. I've been in neighborhood associations, I think perhaps as long as Laura has. And I have perhaps a less optimistic view of neighborhood associations, which at least the ones I've worked with, the emphasis really is on homeowners. And it's even in neighborhoods that have a majority renter population, and not even getting into the issue of people of color and other communities, it's just the representation isn't there, and it hasn't been there in the 20 years I've been working in neighborhood associations. I mean, there's some movement, but I think it's wise that the document does not put an emphasis on neighborhood associations. I don't think they're representative. I think they represent a certain portion of the neighborhoods, but they don't represent the neighborhoods as a whole in general. And so I think that the document has done well to not emphasize that. I am even disturbed, not disturbed, concerned a little by the definitions of recognized organization, and I would even say we need to look at groups that are not recognized by ONI, because ONI itself is sort of tied to the neighborhood system and has some of the same biases as the neighborhood system does, which is to the homeowners. So that would be my comments. I think the document is headed in the right direction, but I think we need to be aware that neighborhood associations are not an accurate representation of the city.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for Doug? No? Appreciate your time. One last call. Anybody else like to testify? Since not, the hearing is closed, and we'll move into recommendations. So Sarah, you want to maybe come back up just in case we have questions? Thank you. Go ahead, Maggie.
Thank you. So one piece. Oh, it's on. The green light's on. One piece of testimony indicated, I think it was saying right there, that there wasn't a clear indication of how feedback would be received and then incorporated. Can you expand a little more on that? I think that's what
A clear indication of feedback
from community members or underserved communities.
And I think, there were a couple of things in the testimony that jumped out at me, one of which you've already brought up. But I think that is asking for that sort of prescriptive level of requiring projects to have these specific steps that they have to meet. So it's a little bit more prescriptive than is sort of at this program level. I think that talking about feedback and accountability is going to be a really important job for the CIC, though, that I think that kind of accountability for feedback is something we hear loud and clear and have heard throughout the comprehensive plan process in particular.
So this is more of laying the framework to allow the CIC and the program to start
Yeah.
developing that prescribed structure.
Yeah, and I think I always end up making this hand gesture when I'm talking about it, and I think that this is really important. It's an iterative thing, and the idea is that you build a program that really supports staff to keep continually improving and to say, you know, this didn't work here, why, what can we do better in this specific context? And so I think that we want to build something that can take that feedback and continually improve.
Any other questions?
So the PBOT recommendations will be incorporated into the public involvement component?
The recommendations that the PBOT asked for would
Yes.
be changes to the text, yeah, the
Text,
supporting
okay.
text.
And that would happen before it went to council then, if we say yes?
Yes.
So do you have any concerns about their recommendations or?
No.
Okay, you're supportive of them. Great. Are there any other questions? I guess I do have a question on the definition and kind of to Doug's point about broadening it even more so. I do feel that I would certainly appreciate hearing from a broader representation of people throughout our entire community. I think it's wonderful that we have such many well-organized neighborhood associations, but it does seem like at least the folks we get that come before us are more often than not property owners. And so to Doug's point, is there any thoughts on or concerns on your point and even broadening it more to maybe not be specifically recognized organizations or a way to look at that even more broad?
And this is actually, I think part of this is a little bit of a, because we have these two pieces of Title 33 that are kind of bundled into this project. And I mentioned before, these are things that could have been in the miscellaneous zoning code amendments project, but were put into here to surface them. And we maybe surfaced them in a way that was confusing because the definitions change is actually a proposed change to the zoning code. And it's actually a housekeeping thing because the comp plan glossary, which has this exact language, has to match the Title 33 definition. So this is a change to change the Title 33 definition to match the comp plan glossary. So this language is straight from the comp plan. But the program, like the community involvement program itself, is absolutely not saying anything about limiting outreach to recognized organizations. Recognized organizations are important, and the role of ONI and charter, in sort of identifying and recognizing organizations is really important. This does not affect that, and nor does it limit us to saying we will only do outreach or work with recognized organizations. So it's a little bit confusing.
So you said it after, I think that last sentence, it doesn't limit you to going beyond just recognized organizations. And I guess that's what I'd like to make sure I hear as well, is that I think that's fabulous. But if there's other organizations or opportunities for groups that want to come forward and get recognized or be participating, I sure hope that they're included.
Yeah, and that's something, that's ONI's purview, and it's, something that they're continually working on and looking at,
Okay. Go ahead, Katie.
Oh, I was just wondering how soon it was going to be implemented, and I think I was asking these kind of questions before. Somebody else reminded me that it doesn't have.
Is your mic on?
I think it is.
Yeah, it's very hard to hear.
No,
Katie. There you
it's
go.
not. All right, bright green is better than low green. So how soon is all this going to be taking place? And there's a lot of pieces that don't show up in the plan, which is like the practical implementation. So, and then if I remember this correctly, part of the testimony last time, some of what you were saying was that they would be sending us reports. Is that correct?
I mean, the CIC,
Yes.
yeah, there would definitely be a relationship between the CIC and the PSC and a reporting back and information flow, yeah.
Right, so how soon is that going to be?
So once
place?
between the time when the comp plan is adopted and the time when it becomes effective, so there's, this time in 2018-ish when the comprehensive plan will become effective, and that will be when the Chapter 2 will become, the rules that we have to follow, and that's when the community involvement program would become effective. But we have we're putting in place sort of the timeline and the process to work with ONI and OEHR and other bodies to establish the CIC so that it'll be ready to be up and running when, that time of implementation happens.
And we're certainly already embracing
Yeah, I was gonna
what's in
say.
here. There's really no official start date. It's now. We've learned so much from the process of developing this program, and even before that, of working on Chapter 2. So we're all sort of reorienting ourselves to be following this in every thing that we do within the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And there is a tremendous amount of legwork that we're starting now to be ready so that we're fully up and running with a new CIC and with new manual in place by the time the comprehensive plan is in effect. So that legwork starts today, really.
Because I would think it would affect budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're right. And because there's been a lot of talk about what kind of commitment to the resources necessary to really carry this out, it means starting work on what that budget looks like and making sure we have the commitment internally and pressure from the outside to say, put our money where our mouth is and make sure that that's built into our budget as we move forward so that these aren't just words on paper, but it really is how we conduct ourselves and commit to our work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion for a recommendation? Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I do have some thoughts that I'd like to share.
Okay.
First, I said this when we were considering Chapter 2 of the comp plan, but I want to emphasize again, I kind of bemoan the change of name from citizenship to citizen involvement to community involvement. And what I'm mourning is the loss of that idea of citizenship as proactively engaging your government to make the community better. And I think that's still a value I hold very highly, but I recognize, as we've done the equity work through the Portland plan, that the challenge is probably not for those citizens who are going to stand up and make their voices heard, in any event. It's for the folks who don't have a good way to give voice to government, and I see this as a shift to, helping find and empower those people to share their voices with us, and that's an important distinction. And in the same vein, the issue of the relative balance of neighborhood associations and other voices, I think Katie and I are probably the only two people on this commission who've actively participated in neighborhood associations. Neighborhood associations are incredibly valuable as a lens for place, as a voice in making our decisions. But by that very nature, they're absolutely not going to attract some people. I mean, I lived in my neighborhood for 3 years before I bought a home, but didn't get involved in my association. It's really about the expectation, the duration of your tenancy. I mean, when I bought a house and knew I was going to be there for a while, that I made the investment to get involved. And I know that for the portion of our community where there are real housing stability problems, neighborhood associations will probably never be the lens through which they will see city government, because they don't know if they're going to be in a given neighborhood for very long. So we have to have mechanisms, whether they're culturally specific or issue-oriented, like the Community Alliance of Tenants. We have to have mechanisms to give voice to groups that won't find a platform in neighborhood associations. So I'm strongly supportive of the directions of this plan in doing that. So, thanks.
Mike?
Yeah, I'll just say ditto. Chris expressed the concerns I have. I'm glad you brought up your question, and Doug provided input, because I think we do need to more broadly embrace the entire community. So,
Maggie?
So I have a question about process. Dang it. Will we be talking about incorporating recommendations from testimony after our first?
I would say if you have something you'd like to
Okay.
suggest, go ahead and suggest it. And then certainly you can make it a motion to incorporate what you're about to suggest.
Great. So I would love to incorporate what PIAC had recommended in terms of, well, it sounds like you're already going to do it, charge and scope of resources, of what's available. as well as increasing, having a liaison from CIC to also PIAC, I think would be great. Looking at specifics on, what are those metrics that community members, neighborhood associations, et cetera, will be looking at to see progress on community involvement processes, and then having specifically a community-involved process to help develop those metrics. And then having that explicit responsibility to the community, but it sounds like a lot of that's been incorporated into the plan. And then additionally, I would say keep hammering in equitable resourcing, right? We know neighborhood associations have held a certain position, right, with respect to the city and community involvement for a long time. And it's the opportunity for folks that have been underrepresented for decades to be better resourced, to have a more robust involvement process.
Are these things that could go in the letter of transmittal? I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds like a list that we create typically when we're approving something that goes in the
Certainly.
letter to give direction.
And I guess I would just have a question for you too, Maggie. Are you saying you want if I'm understanding, I'm not sure if you're saying, you want the metrics incorporated in the plan today, or you want this plan to just say, in the next steps, you need to work on the metrics?
The
latter?
The latter.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess, and it seems appropriate to me that would be in our letter to encourage that. Are there any other kind of comments or concerns?
I'm fully supportive of this plan. I like the direction. I like the broadening of communities coming in. I look at it as kind of leveling the playing field. But the important part is resources. And I hope in our letter that we emphasize this can't be an unfunded mandate. It must be funded by council, and if it's going to be successful. And so it's a big part of this. And so I hope we put that in, get council to support it, not only through passing it, but putting money to it.
Any other comments or suggestions? Anybody want to make a motion?
I recommend the community involvement program to the city council, including the proposed changes to Title 33.
Second.
Any deliberations after that, Chris?
So did we want to actually include the PBOT recommendations?
Yeah,
Courtney's
I
filling
just
in the
realized.
PBOT, yes.
I
those
just-
two.
Yeah, can I want to revise my recommendation.
So do we want to withdraw the second so Andre can revise his recommendation?
Yes. Okay,
Just assume it
I would,
included, but
I would recommend the community involvement program to city council, including the proposed changes to Title 33, and include the proposed PBOT recommendations.
Second.
Okay.
I have
Maggie?
So just adding in the liaison from Community Involvement Committee to PIAC, adding that in as well as a recommendation, just adding a line.
Thought we were putting that in the letter.
In the letter.
Seems like it could easily be put in this draft as well. I don't know. Discussion?
So you want to make a friendly amendment?
I amend that we also include a line that in addition to the Community Involvement Committee's liaison, being a liaison to the Equity and Human Rights Office, that they're also a liaison to the Public Involvement Advisory Committee.
And I'm looking for help now. Does that have to be seconded, or does that just get amended? How does that work, folks?
Yeah. Can I just ask a point of clarification?
Absolutely. I could use all the clarification myself.
So once this is passed, there's actually going to be a committee created to implement this, and they're creating a committee. Would that be, the position that she's indicating, would that be something that this committee could create through their authority that is in here today?
It could be written into their charter, yeah.
It could, they have the ability to do that
Yeah.
without us inserting it here.
Mm-hmm.
But we could direct them through.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so I need some procedural assistance. So I take it, I call the vote, and it includes a friendly amendment, or, and then,
Encourage Andre to restate his motion to include.
Yeah, so I'm going to withdraw,
make it
withdraw
easier.
my motion, withdraw the second, and then you withdraw yours, and then we'll just start all over.
I withdraw my motion or amendment.
I would, the recommendation as stated up on to include PBOT's recommendations and to include a liaison to the PIAC.
Second. I should have disavowed my second.
okay, any additional comments or deliberation? If not, Julie?
Yes.
Well, after all the back and forth, I really do think I need to restate, this is impressive work. You guys done a fabulous job. Linda testified before us before, and obviously you can always do more, but I'm really impressed with the citizen involvement and the work and staff.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sarah, for all your hard work, you and your group. Why don't we take a 5-minute break before we get started on the next item, which is Title 17 TDM street vacations, and be right back. Judith and Eric.
This is the TDM portion. I think we were going to do the streetification portion a little bit later when Michelle gets here.
Okay, thank you.
Ready?
Yes, thanks, Judith.
And I'm Judith Gray. I'm the supervising planner for Portland Bureau of Transportation. I'm here today to give you an update on where we are with our TDM proposals that was included in the December, the updates that we have to the December proposed draft. So today I'm going to talk about two separate TDM proposals. One is a pre-approved plan that would apply in the mixed-use zone, and what we've got there is we're proposing to take this in a two-step process because it would give us some time to work out some of the complexities and some stakeholder engagement, where we would start with a first simplified plan for near-term action, and then frankly give us some time to do some more stakeholder engagement and additional policy development over the course of the remainder of this year and into 2017. And then for the campus and institutional zones, we also have an updated proposal, and both of these proposals are included in your packet. But last week, we had a stakeholder meeting with stakeholders of the campuses, institutions, and some neighborhoods, and they brought their own proposal. And so it actually has some really good ideas, but we haven't had a chance to really discuss it. What we would like to do is continue working with them to bring the best ideas together, so I'll go over that with you as well. But we do have some additional work to do. I just want to review for you that the transportation demand management has been an underlying assumption in a lot of the planning work that the city's been doing for a long time. It is a very cost-effective way to, I see it as closing the gap between the very expensive infrastructure and oftentimes expensive transportation services that we provide and the choice that the individual user makes. We're just trying to make it easier for them to get to make the choice that helps us make the most out of our system. We will always have the need for roadway trip, for private automobiles and for freight. We want to make sure that we're preserving as much of that capacity for those essential roadway trips. We also need to get the mode split targets that are in the transportation system plan in order to meet some of our other growth and climate strategies. And I think that you've all been discussing some of those items for quite some time. We do know that transportation demand management can be effective. This is a slide that summarizes some national data. Of course, every situation is going to be a little bit different, but it just goes to show some of the primary factors. When you take into account the various levels of transit service in an area, the strategies might be marketing and information or alternative commute services like shuttles and carpooling programs, or financial incentives like subsidized transit passes, and that's going to be a big part of what we want to talk about. So those kinds of strategies combined with the parking environment, whether it's free parking or paid parking and different levels of that, we have seen that transportation demand strategies can have the effect of reducing vehicle trips by on the order of 25 to 30%. That will have a significant impact in our longer-term growth and climate strategies. That's why it's important to us. Transportation demand management is currently, it's not entirely new to the city of Portland. Already, conditional use master plans and central city parking reviews are two of the development processes that require a custom transportation demand management plan. The State Department of Environmental Quality requires all employers in the state with more than 100 employees to provide some employee commute options in order to reduce their reliance on single occupancy trips. And of course, there are private sector voluntary programs, in some case individual employers, but Go Lloyd, which used to be called the Lloyd District TMA, Transportation Management Association, is a really successful model that was done as an economic development strategy. And while they had an investment and a commitment to providing employees with transit passes for, I think, about 20 years, we are now seeing tremendous development happening there because they were able to reduce the demand for the surface parking lots and reduce the incoming trips so that they could get ODOT's approval to change the zoning and get some, or to allow higher density of development. So that's, there is a business case to be made. What will be new with the proposal now is to require a TDM plan for residential development. We haven't done that, and so that's naturally leading to some challenges, and that's understandable. Other cities do require TDM programs or offer that as part of their code, but most typically, it's in exchange for reducing the parking requirement. Parking is very expensive, and more developers would rather reduce the amount of parking they have to provide, and they will be happy to provide a transit plaza or some other kind of encouragement for other modes. However, in the city of Portland, we've already either removed or at least drastically reduced our parking requirements, so we no longer have that lever. I do want to say that without the developers, it's nothing new for developers to provide access to their developments, but it usually does happen in the form of parking. And so what we are hoping for now is to have that private participation in ensuring that the access to their developments occurs, but with the more cost-effective means of transit, biking, and walking trips.
So Judith, can I have a few quibbles with a couple points there? I think on the third bullet, absolutely correct that we've reduced or removed the statutory requirement for parking. But in a lot of cases, it's not the statutory requirement that drives the amount of parking. It may very well be the market, right? So I think, in terms of the economics of how we fund TDM, it may be harder to make the argument quantitatively because we can't point to a regulation and say, we reduced your ratio, but I think we can still expect that developers in buildings with good TDM will need to build less parking than they might have if there wasn't TDM. So I think the effect of that bullet is not erased just because we got ahead with the regulation. And the fourth bullet, by means other than parking, I think we need to be a little bit careful as we move into the age of shared mobility that, if I get to work in an Uber, I won't require a parking space at the office, and maybe not one at my home, but the other scarce commodity is space on the road, right? So, I mean, a lot of our discussion about TDM is going to be driven by staying ahead of congestion. And, removing parking is a huge benefit, but so is reducing congestion or not getting into a more congested state. So we should keep in mind the other scarce resource that's involved in that equation as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We have been talking with a lot of stakeholders, some of it here in our meetings with you and hearing some of the public testimony. We had stakeholder meetings back in November and also again just last week with developers and other interested parties. We've met directly with the Portland Business Alliance and building owners, building residents. We've had some common themes in our feedback. And so generally there's a lot of support, and I think that there's a lot of appreciation that transportation demand management strategies are very effective. But there are a lot of questions with what exactly should be implemented and how, where those responsibilities lie, and just a need to develop more details of the program. And I'm happy to say that there has been quite a lot of interest in broader engagement. And we had, for example, we had Rick Williams conduct some interviews for us with some developers, and these themes were reflected there. The Portland Business Alliance has reflected the same thing. There is an interest to get engaged, so I think that while we have work to do, we can move forward. So I'll share with you now this two-step process that we're proposing now. Step one is basically intended to be a simplified TDM plan that can move forward now in conjunction with the mixed-use zone proposal. This would include the main three elements. The first one would be a one-time upfront multimodal incentive. I'll get back to that. The other two parts, one of them is an information piece. The City of Portland, Portland Bureau of Transportation has a program called Welcome Smart Trips, where we provide new movers with information about walking maps and biking maps and transit schedules and that sort of thing. So it's an information program that we would want a developer to subscribe to or provide the same kind of information. And we would want a commitment that there would be participation in an ongoing survey that we would conduct. So where we took away the need for a performance report, we would just like them to participate in a survey that I think we've been doing about every 2 years, and so they would just want some help with distribution. the big item here is the one-time multimodal incentive, and that is intended to, for the first move-in, make it really easy for people to make a different choice about their commute trip or their trips. We set the amount to be equivalent to one annual transit pass per unit. And we did that because oftentimes there are 2 residents in a unit, and we would like there to be enough of a benefit there to provide 2 people with a 6-month pass. But it could be bundled with other kinds of incentives, such as that the value would be calculated based on that $1,100 per unit. It could be bundled with bike share or car share or other kind of mechanisms, and I think that the marketplace is really evolving right now with new kinds of strategies. But it's really important to know this is not a fee that the City of Portland would collect or that would be distributed broadly. This is an obligation for the development to provide this as a value directly to their residents. It isn't, I don't mean to make it seem like I consider it insignificant because of that, but I did want to, there has been some confusion whether this was a new fee for us. It is not that. Are there any questions about this, the makeup here? Yeah.
So I have a question on the $1,100 per unit, and that being based on the notion that there's 2 individuals in that unit.
Yes.
So what if there's only 1 individual? Is there a way to do it by the actual number of occupants?
You know, I don't think there is. And our earlier proposal actually was per resident, and I thought we don't know the number of residents. Usually we just know the number of units, and that's why we changed it.
To keep it simple, and I mean, that for step 2, when we go on to improving on this, that might be a conversation to have, but to keep it simple and make it possible for this to be a one-time upfront thing that gets handled during development, that's where we don't know the number of residents, we just know the number of units.
However, I will say that because of the way these are bundled, a developer could, or a building manager could just give a 6-month pass and then have another one for the next move-in. So they could be flexible about how they are using them if that was the way they wanted to go. It's like Eric said, though, this was to make it possible for the developer to take care of the obligation up front.
As soon as it becomes something that has an ongoing thing, then there's a need for more elaborate rules about how you track that. And that's what we tried to steer clear of in this simplified basic plan.
So if, and for my fellow commissioners, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read Jeff's letter that he provided since he couldn't be here. And basically, I'll summarize if you haven't had the opportunity, and it's that he's looking for an offset to that $1,100 to be provided. And one suggestion could be system development charges. And I guess somewhat where I'm going with this is if this was to be considered as a system development charge offset to that fee, then certainly I guess PBOT could consider whether it makes more sense to just provide the 1 pass per unit, because if they're not getting used, I guess is what I'm getting at, it's sitting here, you may not want to provide that offset for something that's not getting used by multiple people.
So in the past, and I believe this is currently the case, PBOT right now is revising our system development charges. So I can talk about what my experience has been with the system development charges, and then what we've included in the step 2 is to include that consideration as part of that scope. Right now, I know that it has been very common practice in the City of Portland and elsewhere, if a developer is able to use transportation management strategies up front and demonstrate an expected reduction in trips, they can get I think a credit for the SDCs, or generally have the SDCs reduced. I know that that's happened for years, but again, I'm not entirely sure of how it will be going forward. And also, so we'll have to really think about it, because you know, the system development charge does generate important revenue that we use to build the infrastructure, and it is already sharply discounted from the estimated cost of every trip. But so those are the reasons that I'm cautious, but I still think it's an entirely valid question that I would like to include in the second step of the proposal.
And then another point to this is that I've had going through my head is why not put a TDM program together for retailers and to encourage their employees. And I realize it'd probably not be part of initial development costs, let's say, of a mixed-use building, but when that tenant improvement comes through, you could certainly do a program that encourages employees to take mass transit, and I haven't seen any mention of that. Have you thought about that?
I'll let Eric answer that.
Yeah,
one.
we've had discussions between PBOT and BPS on that, and from the BPS side, I think we've discouraged that in this initial phase because for a couple reasons. One is that a lot of the retail that's in the mixed use outside of the central city is pretty small scale, and so we're talking in a lot of cases about 1 or 2 employees on site, and the sort of the cost benefit ratio of the coordination to reach 1 employee versus the coordination to reach 50 residents is just very different. And so it's not that we're opposed to that going forward at some point, but at this first toe in the water in terms of how do we roll out TDM in the mixed-use environment, we didn't think that was the right place to start.
If I could follow up on a couple of those points. So in terms of the offset, I mean, the reason I made the point about the market being the determinant for parking is that I believe that economically there's going to be an offset on the parking. It's just more difficult to measure because we're not requiring it statutorily. So I'm hoping that, to Jeff's point, some of that economic value comes back to the developer. I guess in general, I have a question. This may go more towards the phase 2 development, but in the cities that we've looked at that have done TDM successfully, who's actually funding that? I mean, is it a cost of development, or does the cost land somewhere else? And if you can't answer that now, that's fine, but we come back for phase 2. I'm very interested in the answer to that.
It's going to, I think my perspective is that it's going to depend a lot on the market conditions. In a tight market, you may have enough return that they're going to eat that cost. In some other circumstances, they may be passing it through as additional rent. So it's going to be a little bit different. In other areas, they may be building that up front into their pro forma, and I think it's a little bit situational depending on where you are in the economy and what kind of, how the scale of your development.
Well, it seems like when we get to an ongoing program, which I think is the actual brass ring here, and that's going to rest on the building ownership, not the initial developer, right? So that almost certainly point towards effectively becoming a cost factor in rent.
Yeah, and the way we did it up front is with this step 1 is that because it's a one-time thing, it can be kind of worked into the building development phase and is maybe less of an equation for the ongoing owner, because by the time they own it, it's not an issue.
Okay. So maybe this would be a good time to talk about the timing for step 1 and step 2, because this, like everything else in the comp plan package, doesn't take effect until 2018, right? So we're building, the easy first step, hopefully. But in fact, we might very well have step 2 designed and ready to implement by the time we get to 2018. Is that?
I would certainly hope that we would have it finished in terms of the planning and policy development. What it takes then to go through any public hearing process and all the things that maybe Eric has in mind, but I don't understand yet. That's what I'm not sure about, but I certainly would not want to be going into 2018 continuing step 2. Yes.
Yeah, I think the idea was you need enough certainty about what we're talking about in order to move forward with the mixed-use code having this provision in it. And so this step 1 is really designed to give you some level of certainty about what we're talking about broadly, but it doesn't preclude the step 2 of improving on it and working out additional ideas. And if that takes 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, that'll be what it takes.
Gary?
I have a few questions. I was a little confused by the chart on page 2 in terms of what our reasonable expectations should be about the effectiveness of the TDM program here. Specifically, the bottom couple lines about, it looks really good if you include parking in the bundle, but we're not including parking in the bundle. So what should our expectations be of the program?
Well, I think they're going to vary widely even within the city. I believe our modeling for the long term with full TDM might go as high as a 25% reduction. I think that's what we would like to see
I'm sorry, I'm having
I
trouble
think that
hearing.
we would like to see a 25% reduction in vehicle trips as a result of transportation demand management. That's an overall number for the entire city in the long term. But a lot of it will depend on things like areas that have less transit service are going to have less opportunity. So that's the order of magnitude that we think we need.
So the higher figure, the 25% figure, that's only, in the study, it was only achieved when it was bundled with parking.
That's correct.
Why would we believe that we would achieve that level of effectiveness without a parking impact?
We do have a paid parking environment throughout much of the city, and I think it will continue to be constrained in many areas. Obviously not all areas, but even in the mixed-use zones, we'll be doing this at the same time as we're developing a residential a parking permit program that's going to limit the availability on streets. So I think that different areas of the city will operate differently. In the central city, for example, we would have quite a bit more effectiveness in the reduction of vehicle trips as opposed to areas outside of the central city. So
The land use aspect of that question is we're putting more than half of our mixed-use growth in areas that by 2035 we expect to have managed parking. So that's part of the answer. And the second part of it is that in a constrained environment, although we're not requiring it, many mixed-use buildings are actually charging their residents for the parking. And that's happening fairly routinely already.
Okay. Second question relates to the $1,100 bundle, and maybe you'll get into this more, but what do we know about the impact of turnover on this kind of effectively first-year incentive or first resident incentive? What I would envision is that somebody moves in, they get the incentive for the first year, or effectively they get it for the first year, and whether they stay a year or two or three, that benefit gets diluted out over time, and then when the next new resident comes into that unit, they don't get the incentive. Is that correct?
that is correct under this proposal, which is why we have to go to the to step 2, because we do think that when people make a move, changing a job or changing a residence, that is a time when folks are making changes in other areas of their lives. They're more open to it. And so we think it will be a lot more effective if we could have an ongoing program, an ongoing obligation for new residents moving in, but that's where we have more work to do to develop what that would be.
So you see more acceptability on the part of developers as you go through, after there's been some implementation of the step 1?
I don't,
I think
I didn't understand the question.
I think the idea is we need more time to figure out the impact of that kind of ongoing. We conceptually think it would be helpful to have that ongoing program. I mean, we also think it would conceptually be helpful to apply this to existing buildings, not just new development, but we need more time to judge the wider effects of those two kind of expansions of this approach and whether they're appropriate and how they get balanced out with all the other cost considerations. And we're not quite there yet.
Right. The December proposed draft did include an ongoing obligation to provide multimodal financial incentives, so something like this. But there were so many remaining questions, whether then it's no longer the developer, it's the building manager, and how does that, we need to know more about how you carry that obligation forward when you're no longer in the land use approval process. And so those were the kinds of questions. It also changes, is it the cost of development or does it get passed on as additional rent? So those are the kinds of considerations that we need to take some time to think through.
Okay. Last question. You're eliminating from step 1 the targets for reduction in auto ownership and and mode share. Do you envision that coming back? Do you envision those targets coming back? And if not, how are we going to know if we're effective?
Well, possibly. When you see next a slide that shows the proposed, some of the key scope items for step 2, I don't think that I've included that. One of the reasons is that I think in individual development, we want to have the survey because we want to know how we're doing overall. But to tie an individual development to that requirement of achieving a specific mode target, think we need to have a better understanding of that. They may have less ability to do that. There's so much more about what's the available transit service and what is the walking and biking environment. And that's I'm thinking about a small development of 15 or 20 residential units. So to tie that development to needing to meet the specific mode split targets seems a little weaker, although what we do want to do is make sure that we have the survey so that we can see how we're doing overall.
So if I'm.
So the concern is about tying the metric to the individual project rather than maintaining it as a community-wide standard?
Yeah, the TSP, if I'm correct, still has those goals broadly articulated as a city policy. What's changed is we removed it from the standards that apply to individual buildings.
But, we could. That's the kind of feedback that I'm very interested in hearing from you. If that's the kind of feedback, or if that's something that you think should be included when we talk about what would be included in the Step 2 scope. So,
Thank you.
Andre?
So, first, we need, as I understand this is just for new development. So existing, the 90% out there right now, probably this doesn't affect at all.
That's correct.
So Step 2 would take that into account, how to get to the 90%, the people that are existing today, and how do we get TDM to them?
That's what I would like to explore. That was not something that was included in the December draft, so it'll be a new conversation. But yes, even with our growth forecasts, we're still going to have more than half of the residents and employees out there not participating. And so I would like it if we could find a way to do the expansion, including that. Let me step right through if you don't mind, because there's.
I was just going to say, would you like to go through Step 2 and then have more discussion?
And this is what I'd already identified. I think this is also summarized in your memo. So we do know that we have to have more stakeholder engagement. And the last time I was here, I showed a scope of work and a timeline that included a stakeholder advisory committee as well as a working group. That was with a more accelerated process in mind, but I think we would probably still do something similar to that. So some of the key scope items were these: the ongoing commitment for new development as it comes in, so to capture some of the turnover in the residential. The opportunity to include existing private development, as you were just saying. And then these last bullets are all things that came specifically from some of the recent comments we've heard. What kinds of requirements are appropriate for the central city rather than the mixed-use zone? And the December draft, I think, was intended to apply to both. But we heard at a stakeholder meeting we had last week, and I think it was a good argument, that the central city really needs to have a different treatment. So this would apply, what you have today applies only to mixed-use zone, and I'd like to work with stakeholders to determine an approach for the central city. How parking management measures should be included. Is there a role for third-party service providers such as transportation management associations? Those are very successful models and could be a successful model for the existing development, because those just have to be attached to some of the private sector objectives more effectively than just us making it a city requirement. There were questions, and I think this gets to what Commissioner Bachrach asked, but other questions as well about on-site infrastructure, system development charges, other transportation costs. I'm aware that a lot of the frustration that developers are experiencing right now is that there are so many things in flux that it's hard to know where things are landing, and I think that this could give us a good opportunity to get a better landscape of all of the different changes in transportation and other kinds of development costs. And of course, to take a look at the impacts on affordable housing and other development goals. So these are just some of the comments that we've heard that are good questions that I'd like us to have a good conversation about.
And I would like to add one. I know TriMet has just initiated a low-income transit study. And part of that is to look at their system-wide and how could they provide low-income residents a subsidized transit pass, similar to what Seattle's doing. And but when you look at those across, well, really Seattle and some of the other places, they tie into development and existing, so TDMs may be able to offer that low-income pass as a part of their strategy of existing and new development from that standpoint. I'm not sure how it's all going to work. I mean, they've just started a discussion, so I'd like to make sure we don't lose, that doesn't kind of come in and people say, well, what about this path, that we engage TriMet in that conversation as they, I think within a year, they're to come back with kind of options for the board.
That's good, thank you. I will add that.
Huh?
I will add that.
Oh, okay. And then one other thing I would like to, just for us to think about is, Judith said this at kind of the beginning, this is about our climate action plan, and this is transportation, and this is about, we've looked at targets for trees in the right-of-way, we've talked about green streets, we've talked about investment in highways and streets, and Chris talked about congestion. If we can't reduce the trips on the streets, we're not going to achieve a lot of those other goals. And so it is going to be painful. We're going to have to price people out of their cars, and it's going to be one way or the other. But somehow, if we're going to have less congestion and not spend a lot of money in transportation on bigger streets and less some of these other things and reach some of our climate action goals, we have to kind of bite the bullet here and take some of these things. And we have to look at, I think in the phase 2, some of these conditions. What is the impact on low-income housing and low-income residents? What is the impact on developers, and what are our trade-offs? But I think you got to step forward first and then come back, hopefully before the implementation of the comp plan, with what we can do. I would also remind us that, and Judith can chime in, PBOT does not need to come back to us to implement this. They've been told by the city attorney, they're done. It's a city engineer policy. So we are now, hopefully they're coming back and they're cooperating, but we're not in control anymore. And we want to be in control because it's our policy around climate action plan. It's our policy around the community's health. It's our policy around transportation and the investments that we made early on. And we really need transportation here as a partner going forward and working with our development community and the institutions to come back with a solid plan in phase 2 to say, this is how we do it. Because we will be looking at the climate action plan about the same time, and if we're not doing what we want to do in phase 2, our climate action plan may have holes.
Just real quick, Maggie, I know that you need to leave. Did you have anything you'd like to add before you go? Okay, we got you a little more time. Fabulous. Are there any other
Actually-
let's focus on, do you have anything else on mixed-use zones?
I can't remember, I have to see my next
Okay,
slide.
go ahead.
Okay, so this was further to Commissioner Baugh's point. Just to clarify, this is triggered by Title 33 code, which does require your recommendation. I know Eric will be interested in that. The Title 17 code, where these technical requirements of the TDM plans are, is administered by the Bureau Director or the city engineer and approved by council. But we would much rather go to council with your support. And I'm not yet trying to figure out a way to go to council without your support.
We appreciate that. Is that your last slide on mixed use?
Oh, there you go. There's-
Okay.
Do I have these dates right? I had to check with Eric.
Yeah, so in terms of the mixed-use TDM details, this meeting today is your time to discuss the specifics of sort of how that simplified stage 1 plan works. But ultimately, your formal vote is when you vote on the mixed-use project, and your next session on that is June 28th. To the extent you're satisfied or not satisfied, that can be part of that discussion. And And I think Judith said she's hoping for a letter of support that, that would be able to go to council. And then, of course, you may also want to mention this in your transmittal of the mixed use as well.
Thank you. Katie?
I just have to ask some basic questions because there's just some things that haven't clicked for me. And so the developers would be paying $1,100 for each unit, and that would go for transportation incentives. What if the person in the unit doesn't want the incentive? I mean, they would probably use something, but I'm missing a piece. What if they say, oh yeah, sure, I'll take a bus pass, but then they don't really use it?
That's what we're tracking in the survey to find out what really happens to this program.
Okay, so this is really just out of the box kind of, we're needing to be innovative.
I think so, and I actually think that the way I envision it now, the simplest way, which may not be the final way, is to have it be a calculated fee paid at the time of the building permit, which then becomes an account. And then that building could take it in any form it wants. And if one building says, I don't need that because I work, for whatever reason.
Yeah, I have a job. I
They
have a
would still
job where I
have
have
the
to drive
value.
across town. I need my car.
That-
Blah,
but they
or
would- so
I'm
the-
disabled. I need my car. Blah.
Yeah, so the
That's
building
it.
would still have the value of that incentive.
Uh-huh.
Now, so that's the idea. We may find a different way to administer it, but the idea is still that if this unit doesn't want anything, then the building manager still has it to provide to the next move-in or to provide in some other way.
The statistics that Judith cited at the beginning about the overall success of these kind of programs doesn't rely on every person taking it. The trip reduction is in aggregate. If you offer this benefit, a certain percentage of trips will be avoided. That's still a success, and it's still cheaper to do it that way, even if some people don't take the benefit, than to build a wider road or to do other things to provide more road capacity.
Right. So here's a question. I'm just the one thing that I think of when I think of public perception of something like this is a lot of times people really, really like getting the incentives, but then if it's wasted in some way, then people will look at that and go, oh, man, why did they make us do that? So I'm just wondering, is there a way to keep from the waste of having somebody like take a bus pass that they never use, and then they tell their friends, oh yeah, they gave me a bus pass, but I never use it. And, I'm just curious about that piece of it.
I think you're making a really good point, and I appreciate you raising that. Our intention had been to make something so flexible that it would be able to be used by anybody, and I wasn't imagining that, but I've heard it raised by a few folks, and so I'll just add that for something that we need to make sure that it's flexible enough that it's not prone to waste. I think it's a good caution.
The transferability of it is the key thing, that if the requirement is that the building provide that level of value, and that once that value is created and stays within the building, if a number of people turn it down, that might make, and this is the flexibility we need to talk about, but that might mean that another unit gets two of them because there's more to go around. And so we need to be flexible enough so that the benefit arrives at the people who really want it.
Well, I just can imagine if somebody was offering me a bus pass, but I was going to drive my car all the time anyway, then I might just take the bus pass and just use it once in a while. But that isn't really the point of this,
It
so-
could be. I mean, all of it is on the average aggregate overall, what's the impact? So for some
Yeah.
people, it might be a smaller impact than others, and that may
Okay.
be okay.
Okay. I'm just trying to-
Maggie?
Thank you.
So just because I don't know, so if we're eliminating, say, parking requirements, reducing them, what actually are ADA requirements around accessible parking for developments?
You have
Just
to
like-
provide it.
If you provide parking, you have to include accessible parking, but there's no,
But if you don't provide parking, you don't have to provide accessible parking.
Correct.
correct.
That's right.
So
But there are mechanisms to get an accessible space on the street. You can apply for one.
Chris?
So I'm old enough that I can remember the genesis of Smart Trips. I was actually on TPAC when we were tracking the studies from Europe and Australia around the first programs. And one of the features of those programs, as I recall, was that they were highly personalized. That basically somebody would go out and interview you and understand your travel needs and tailor the tools that you needed. So so the incentives could take a lot of forms. They could take maybe it's a Zipcar membership, or and I'll promote this because as of today you can go online and sign up for Biketown here in Portland. The membership's opened up today, and I signed up for my $12 a month pass, so I encourage you all to go do that. Or, maybe you just need a rain jacket so you can cycle in the winter, and that would be an appropriate incentive, or Uber discounts, whatever it is. And I would think that in that spirit, if you interview somebody and they say, well, a transit pass is nice, but I'm going to drive anyway, if we were being smart, we wouldn't spend any money on them. We'd spend it on their neighbors, right? And do what makes the most sense in terms of bang for the buck. So, I hope as we get into designing phase 2 that it's very data driven, and that we find ways, not just to measure through surveys, but measure through the use of the tools. So if we pay for a Zipcar membership for somebody, we get a report on how often they use Zipcar. Or if we're buying a transit pass, hopefully it's the one that goes into your smartphone, and we could measure the actual use by that person as opposed to relying on a survey at the end of the year. So this is a smart cities application, right? And I know that we're putting a lot of investment in smart cities on the other side of the house in PBOT. So we should be linking TDM with that effort and making this data driven. And I'll just go back to kind of the theory, following up on Andre's comments. In transportation, we talk about, I always forget if it's 4 E's or 5 E's, but it's engineering, enforcement, encouragement, education, and I think there's a fifth one I'm forgetting. Somebody will remind me. But this is really the education and encouragement piece, right? So we have the existing Smart Trips doing the education, and we're really using the incentives here to amp it up with the encouragement, right? And as Andre said, the whole theory behind this comp plan is that we are not expanding the street network. We're using the street network we have and making it more effective by parsing it out in a different kind of mode share. And if we don't make this work, we can either sort of use the carrot, which TDM is really the carrot to entice people out of their cars. And if that doesn't work, we're going to fall back on the stick, which is the streets will be so congested, people will be forced out of their cars because we won't be able to accommodate all the trips. So it's going to be a much nicer Portland if the carrots work. So it's important that we figure out how to fund the carrots and make them effective. So I think that's the prescription for stage 2.
I just want to make two comments on things that you said there, or that were triggered in my head. One is that Judith said earlier that it is our intention to make this flexible enough so that there's an option for third-party implementation, like Go Lloyd. But it may go further than that in terms of, there are niches potentially for third-party implementers and app developers to provide the glue that makes this easier. And that's the intent, it's not something we can work out in this first step, but it's a long-term interest. So it does absolutely tie to the sort of smart cities data end. The other thing to point out is to the idea of a more tailored approach. We've been focused on the starter sort of step 1, but even with the step 1, there still is in Title 33 the option to do a tailored plan if a developer is big enough and wants to go through a review to establish an alternate tailored plan. That is still an option. It's just not the expected path, but it could be a path for a larger development that really has a more curated environment in mind.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll tell you that my gut feeling is that as engineers we look at what's the right scale to solve a problem at, and it's pretty clear to me that TDM is a problem that needs to be solved at district scale. That solving it at a building scale is not going to be a very effective approach. So I'm okay with signing off on this step one that gives certainty to small developers because we need to give them that comfort. But I think ultimately, the programs are going to have to be ongoing. They're going to have to apply to new and existing buildings, and the tailoring to some degree will need to happen at a district scale because you'll know what the transportation circumstances are for the district, what the characteristics are, and you'll be able to design programs for that district that make sense. So as you're figuring out stage two, I would encourage you to think about, I think it's not surprising that Go Lloyd has been so successful focusing on a district because they know the characteristics of the district. And then in South Waterfront, we gave streetcar passes to people moving in. Very similar to the concept you have here, and that works because there's streetcar in the district. So I think be thinking about the unit of a district as part of the focus of your solution. And then I had one specific nit question in your memo. On page 5 in the other changes from the prior proposal, number 1 is removes TDM requirements from central city zones. And I'm confused about that because it's my understanding that when CC 2035 comes to us, it's going to come with a TDM linkage in Chapter 33 as we have with campuses and mixed use. Is that not correct?
That had been the plan until we heard from the stakeholders and until we decided that we needed to look at the central city differently. And so in the near term, I'm not sure, I talked with Eric and other BPS staff on the central city plan, and they felt it was okay for us to take it out of for this process. But it will be one of the key questions in step 2 to include something in central city.
So just to be super clear about that, the initial Title 33 proposal in the central city will not include that.
So that's disappointing to me.
So, real quick, Mike's been waiting patiently, and then you can follow up.
So I get to go?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been sitting here thinking as this conversation has gone on, it's a deja vu going back 20 or 30 years in a very an analogous situation, and it also involved engineers. And the Corps of Engineers, whether it be stormwater management, no matter what, engineers want to build things. They want to build pipes, they want to build structure. And one of the big battles we fought for the last 30 years is getting people to think about non-structural approaches that reduce the need to build things, build infrastructure. And this strikes me as a very similar situation. We're trying to figure out ways to avoid having to spend millions, if not billions more, on hard infrastructure. So I really like this approach. I do share Katie's concern, and I think Catherine expressed this. I have a personal experience where I bought a membership in 24-Hour Fitness and agreed to pay for a year for a friend who I won't name. And it turned out, sure enough, 6 months later, they hadn't been to it once. So I called them up and said, forget it, I'm not paying for another 6 months. So the idea that we do need to have flexibility so that we're not getting into a situation like that, which would really cause, I think, a lot of consternation in the community, that we're sure we're not wasting those resources and they're being used in a more effective manner. But I like the approach because it's a non-structural, multi-objective approach. But with those concerns in terms of people actually utilizing these opportunities.
I have just 2 quick questions. When you say third-party development, is that private or is that quasi-semi-public?
Well, the examples we know are things like a Transportation Management Association.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think about. There may be an idea or a model that I haven't thought about. Eric may have some. I know he's been talking about this for a while.
I think it could be both. You have the quasi-public sort of TMA kind of organization that could play a role, but it's also not unreasonable, as Chris said, that the scale of where this makes the most sense is beyond a single building, and so there may be a business model where a private entity, private for-profit entity could manage a portfolio of buildings to implement TDM, and we aren't far enough along to understand that fully in terms of how it might work, but we you know, it's a possible model that's out there, and we're not excluding that. We're also not really working it out right now.
It just seems to me there's maybe an opportunity for a private entity, maybe nonprofit, because if you're looking at scale and now you're applying it across the city, the ability to go to TriMet and purchase a big bundle of passes, get you a discount, and thinking about smart cities, whether it's bikes or smart cars or whatever, to bundle a lot of purchases and then go back to the developer and say, I'll provide this for you. And I can tell you whether they're using it or not and do all the services for you for a fee.
Right. And there's been a lot of discussion in the technical world about sort of the Holy Grail app that manages all your transportation for you.
Yeah.
And this is a twist on that in terms of being the interface between this requirement and individual building owners. And that's a possible path this could go down.
Just real quickly, so the concern I expressed also is, so 2035 downtown, where does that TDM come back? So how does it, if it's not here, and we have 2035 coming to us, where will we see TDM downtown?
It would be later. It would be on the timeline of sometime in 2017, and it would be difficult, I think, there is some risk about the implementation of Central City 2035. If that was right at the beginning of 2018, it would be one of the first questions that we would want to address. So it's not our preferred. It was, we were persuaded that it was.
Well, can we persuade you back?
reasonable.
I'd really like you to bring TDM to us with CC 2035.
Well, first, Maggie, I know you need to go, so why don't you go ahead and then.
Yeah, I mean, this thought isn't fully formed, but I was just thinking, particularly as if we start thinking about employers, right? I think we also see a geographic burden of, like, if we're looking at East Portland, and a lot of their jobs are still in the central city, that burden, right, of having, there's an increased burden of the cost of a car. And also, like, increased burden of time spent if they were to take up incentives and use a bus. So I'm sorry, it's not fully formed, but keeping that in mind, that we have a geographic burden, which is also often accompanied by lower income, right? Why are people out further east? It's often because there's market rate affordable housing. So just keep that in mind as we're looking towards targeting employment, TDM around employment entities or employers. Just like what unintentional financial burden or time burden, which is a financial burden on folks in East Portland.
Are you thinking about for residents who are in East Portland but are still having to travel?
Yeah, because, right, like the bus pass, even if it's fully provided, may not be worthwhile because they're still going to be on a bus that takes them an hour and a half to get to work, right? A car could save more time, even if it could be more costly.
Yeah, and I think that is reflected in, we have a lower expectation about the effectiveness in those areas that don't have as good a transit service. So, yeah.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
speak? What would they spend it on besides a bus pass then? I mean, what could they spend it on besides a bus pass?
Well, in the near term, certainly bike share, and I think car share. There are probably some other things, but I think that there are other models that are coming up, and so I don't know what those might be. There are, let's see, there's car sharing, but I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. Those are the big ones that we know we have to include. I'm just sort of waiting for more models to come up. They may be other kinds of, for example, there was recently an article about Uber actually sort of providing a sort of a a mini transit service in a way to high-volume origin-destination pairs. So it wasn't exactly TriMet, it wasn't the same as typical car share, but those are different. The world of the marketplace and transportation is evolving so quickly that my hope is that I think that we'll see more things come up. I expect that it would primarily be transit and bike share and possibly car share.
So a model that the Swan Island TMA used with some effectiveness, I think, was van pooling. So you get a number of neighbors who live in the same area and are going to like employment destinations, and basically the employer through a program provides a van that they can use to van pool everyone to work.
I just want to, thank you, Maggie, echo the concern about Central City. I guess I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around enforcing it for mixed-use zones, or at least putting it into place for mixed-use zones and not Central City. And if we're not ready to do it in Central City, then I think you're ready to do it in mixed-use zones, but it seems to me you could figure out a program for Central City that would kind of reflect more of the approach that we're taking here. That's something simple, followed up by something that takes a process to get through. So I guess it's a challenge back in concert with kind of Chris to reconsider that.
Okay.
The factors that I think that are in play are in the Central City. There's a more complex sort of ecosystem of property owners and stakeholders, and that's part of the factor is that we want to, and entities like GoLloyd that are just more organized, and so we kind of want to take enough time so that we have those entities have their buy-in, because prematurely going forward may not help us, and so that's part of our thinking. I don't disagree that it makes sense in the Central City. It's a time factor in terms of how we approach it and where we are with stakeholder involvement. Because we had been proposing this with mixed use all along, it's not as surprising to those stakeholders in the Central City, because this proposal came in later in their multi-year process. It is more of a, from their perception, it may seem like more of a last-minute add-on, and that's partly why we're slowing that down a little bit.
Completely appreciate that, because I think a lot of people need to weigh in for all of the TDM measures that we're kind of thinking of as step 2. But I would say there's got to be a logical tie-in between what's happening in the Central City and the corridors. And for instance, my employer provides options for people, and therefore, if they're living out in the corridors, they don't need a bus pass that's already being provided for by a business entity that's in the Central City. And so it kind of goes back to, they're not going to use that option necessarily because it's already being provided. So I think understanding how the two work together is really important as we move forward.
One of the arguments that we heard and that I had to pay attention to is that there's such a different parking environment in the Central City that folks who choose to locate there have already sort of invested in a non-single occupancy vehicle lifestyle in many ways. And so while I don't think that means that nobody who lives, I think some people do move into Central City and have cars. They still do have some parking. We have private parking that folks can lease. It did need to have a separate look. So I would, if we can find a way with the Central City plan to do something that's of comparable, something we can, a little simpler, I would be interested in doing that, but I do think we run the risk of doing it badly. And so that's the concern.
So I don't want to, since we're trying to get through mixed-use plans and central and campus institutions, we're getting a little bit off track. Okay. And so if we've got a little bit of time at the end, maybe we'll circle back on that topic, if that's okay with everybody. I guess the hope here is that we can get some support for your two-step process and an understanding of the two stages. And if there's concerns or items that we want to have reconsidered in those two stages. Yep. And maybe let's kind of finish up comments on mixed-use zones, TDM.
Can
will
I
go to
just-
campus institutions.
Excuse
Go
me,
ahead, Deborah.
just to jump in, and I appreciate your wanting to move on. I do notice that Troy Doss from the Central City team is here. He needs to leave in about 10 minutes, so if you do have any question that would be appropriately addressed to Troy.
Okay, forget everything I said.
No,
Troy, come
we
on
can
up.
make it super quick, but I just don't want to lose the opportunity if you have, just for him to offer a minute of his thoughts.
Real quick, you guys have all raised some really great questions, and you're trying to figure out the complexity of all this. We're trying to figure that out too. So trying to put something in a code now that says, well, we're going to adopt it now, but figure it out later, makes us and our stakeholders very concerned. Also, I would say that this is coming in. This isn't a perception. This is coming in at the very end of a multi-year, 5-year process where we never once discussed this as part of our quadrant plans. So now we are going to have to go back out and really make sure that there is adequate buy-in from different folks. I think the equation of how you look at employment versus residential, the mixed-use zone project, what I'm picking up is you're looking at mostly residential. One of the things that we've raised is, what if you do a development downtown with no parking as a residential project? You can pretty much assume that a lot of those people are going to be using a multimodal way of getting around because they don't get to park on the street like they do out in the neighborhoods. There's just no option for them. Now, it's different for employers. So one of the things we want to look at is, what's the complexity? How does that thing work differently in this environment than it does elsewhere in the city? And we want to do that by figuring out that before we propose the code. Now, I know it's a great time to be making amendments to the Central City Plan because that's what we're doing. But I've been here for 15 years, and we've been doing nothing but making amendments to the 1988 plan. So I think we have adequate time, and probably to do something like this, to get the buy-in we need and to make sure it works, we need to give this a little more time to make it work. We're putting a proposal out next week, and I think that that's really not going to give us a lot of time to give it this, the kind of airtime it needs out there in the community and to deal with all the complexities of this issue before it comes to you later this summer. That's why we're asking for more time.
Go ahead.
It's not a, I understand the need for more time. What I'm trying to tie in is the comp plan gets implemented in 18. We've got this phase 2. It would seem appropriate that the Central City could catch up during that time if you're coming out right now and make, we get one TDM Stage 2 Central City, everybody together to look at an entire package of how the city works, because otherwise we're going to have the same problem coming back with a non-Central City plan for TDM. And I will address, the concern is really going to be, how come downtown's not doing anything? I think Catherine's right. Why isn't downtown doing anything when we're telling mixed-use zones out in the neighborhood, you have to do something? And that seems, on the face of it, very unfair. And so I push PBOT to bring the Central City along so that we get a look at everything and balance the challenges that Central City has with employment and yeah, building housing without parking because of the really rich transit options they have downtown relative to East Portland that is transit poor, and still having to do TDMs. And how do we balance that and look at those together versus separately?
I guess one of the things I want to figure out, and we'll be back before you in 2 weeks with the Central City Plan, Central 2035 as a briefing. This will be a good opportunity to talk about it some more then. But one of the things I want to really play out there is, I'm at a loss to figure out from a codes perspective what we would put in Title 33 now without figuring out any of these details. Now, I would agree with you 100%. We have roughly a year and a half to figure it out. That's why I would say we have action items that say go figure out different things that we also haven't figured out in Central City, and there's a number of them. I would add this as a pretty high priority action item to figure out. But I think it would be irresponsible, honestly, to put something in the code right now that we haven't fully figured out, and that puts a big ticket item for one thing for development, and doesn't really know all the details about how this works better with the existing system we do have, how it works differently for residential versus institutional versus commercial development downtown. It's a much different environment. It's also a managed parking environment, which is highly regulated much differently than any of the other places that this is being proposed for. So we really want to make sure we get it right. We're not saying let's not do it, but we are saying we really need to get it right. We have 18 months to do it. I say give us an action item that clearly outlines that task of work, and we'd be happy to work with PBUT on it.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, Troy, my comment would be, I don't have any issues with Central City taking the time it needs to do the work it needs to do correctly and responsibly. My concern is is really more now a discussion of understanding that that's going to lag. Should mixed-use zones lag with it at all? That's where my head's at, for whatever that's worth, fellow commissioners, and they can talk into it. And because I think the two really do need to tie together and have an understanding. Go ahead, Chris.
So I'll go back to the Central City Concept Plan where we started to map all this out. And, what I remember from that process is, very early identifying that we needed to grow trips inside and to the Central City by 50% without growing auto trips. And, I don't believe that's possible without a TDM component. So I would also note that, there's a building on the drawing board in the Pearl right now with a 1.2 parking ratio. So, we've done some good things, but doesn't mean there's a lot more places we have to go. So I agree with Kat that, we should take the time to do it right, because we do have to sort out, what residential TDM looks like versus employment TDM and how they play together in a place like the Central City. Yes, that's complicated. But I think we have to go into our consideration of CC 2035 with the expectation that there will be TDM in the Central City. We may not be able to map out what it is, but I think we have to set that bar clearly that, we're not going to be successful without a TDM component.
We would agree with you. The policy statement's still there. We can put additional actions to discuss this, and I think you raise a really good point about parking ratios. I think that if we're saying that we really want to encourage people to use transit, yet we do have some sub-districts where the parking ratios are still very high, we have to kind of maybe curb our enthusiasm for how far we're going to get. So I think we need to look at all of those components together and saying, how does our overall package of improvements regarding transportation, parking included, actually factor into this reduced use of vehicle trips over time?
I'm going to try to pull you back to the agenda again, and see if we can shift gears to update you on the campus aspect of this.
I'd like to finish up mixed use zone because I haven't quite had an opportunity. At least I don't know if anybody else has some further comments on mixed use zone kind of stages. So I actually echoed Jeff. Judith, I'm completely supportive of a double stage and kind of want to set the groundwork. But I am concerned with $1,100 a unit. I'm sitting here running the math, and I've got a 300 unit project going on that's $330,000. I'm seeing an eco roof being added on. That's another $300,000. I've got a construction excise tax that's probably going to go into effect here at the end of the year. It's another $400,000. I'm all of a sudden at $1 million for just a few things that are about to kind of come across in all of the zoning codes that we're looking at. I mean, this is big money. And I think we're fooling ourselves not to believe that this isn't going to get passed on to the renters. They're going to pay for it. And unless we can provide an offset to the developer to not do that, it's going to happen, especially as you start layering on in stage 2 to existing development. And so I guess this is kind of my plea to my fellow commissioners to hopefully put something in the letter that says, well, I'm in support of your plan of a stage 1 and a stage 2. I'm supportive putting in the encouragement to buy some form of alternative mode split, but I would like to see an offset considered, and that PBOT and take some time to figure out what that could be. It seems if TDM is really going to work, and the plan is to reduce congestion and the cost of providing more infrastructure dollars throughout the city to support the transportation of single occupancy vehicles, that a reduction in SDCs is kind of the one that seems to me the most logical tie, but obviously open to suggestions. Silence, crickets.
So I'm going to offer a motion for people to shoot at.
So are we done with the whole TDM, or are we still?
Well, I think
with mixed use, right?
We'll
So-
just kind of take
okay.
mixed use.
Mixed use, oh,
and
okay.
See if we can get consensus
Oh,
on
okay.
mixed use.
So I will offer a motion that the commission support the simplified phase 1 as a starting point, understanding that it will be modified in Stage 2, and suggest that Stage 2 should include both ongoing programs for new residents, a component that finds a way to bring in all buildings, not just new buildings, and looks at targeting to make sure that the incentives are deployed in a way that will maximize effectiveness.
Second.
Any comments, questions, deliberations?
I would just add that I support your comments around to make sure during, I guess would be phase 2, that you evaluate offsets. And in that evaluation, be part of what comes back to us, I guess, through that phase 2. So
Are you going to ask me
no,
to?
No. This
to
will just be
withdraw
part
my
of the-
second.
Part of our letter.
My request would be that it's part of Stage 1, and it goes to council saying, as we implement Stage 1, that offsets be considered as a part of Stage 1, and that as we further refine it and understand it, that it continues to be thoughtful deliberations on that notion. Because again, if Stage 1 gets implemented prior to Stage 2 being completed, you're going to have a bunch of developers who are going to go down that path of providing the $1,100 a unit, and I do think it's going to have an effect on the affordability of the units in our community.
Yeah. Well, that's the conundrum. You and Jeff think Stage 1 is too expensive, and I think it's weak tea.
Well, I think it's expensive, and
Yeah.
it's expensive, but it's combined with everything else that we're considering, which are all really good things. I struggle with each and every one of them, and I think there is a solution and a tie to SDC fees that should be considered.
Well, and I hope the reduction in parking is, the reduction in the parking the market would require in that situation would provide some of the offset.
And I completely appreciate your position on that as well, but I also have apartment projects that are building very little parking already, so that's not going to reduce what they're building at this point at all. And then not only that, we have a requirement that we've put into place that we're now forcing people to build parking, and so you kind of got a little bit of a struggle there.
Just a quick question. The timing of Stage 1 and this recommendation. So this would go with the comp plan, correct?
This would go with the implementing project, with the mixed-use zones and the TSP Phase 2. I hate to be using so many phases and stages, but this fall it would go to council.
This fall it would go to council.
But not be effective until 2018.
January 1, 2018 is the current date in the comp plan.
Okay.
So, Kat, I will accept your language as part of my amendment, part of my motion.
Appreciate that.
My seconder will.
Great.
Okay, any other discussion?
And just to clarify that this vote, if you're having a vote, is about the letter you're sending, not necessarily
I guess that's true.
recommending
we
the
probably
Title
just need a hands
17.
of consensus, and maybe just do it that way. Just. I think we have hands, Julie. We're in consensus. Okay, let's move on to campus.
Okay. So now the big difference, one of the big differences with campus and institutional TDM requirements is that they are not new. So that makes it a little bit easier. Currently, so we have, I think, 13 specific campuses or institutions to which this would apply. They typically have their land use approvals as a part of a conditional use master plan or an impact mitigation plan, which is a type 3 review. It has a custom TDM plan requirement, which gets regular updates, I think on the order of 3 to 10 years. I'm mostly familiar with 10-year ones. It also requires a traffic impact analysis, which is also required to do for that longer-term 10-year horizon, or whatever the horizon is for a longer-term development plan. With the proposed campus and institution zone, they will still be required to provide a traffic impact analysis and a transportation demand management plan. And there has been some frustration about that from the stakeholder representatives because it's unusual for a specific zone with by right development to have such a high bar with a little bit of some variability there. But the reason is that campuses and institutions are highly variable in development impacts. We know that if we have a certain area zoned for residential use, we in transportation can have a pretty good estimate of what the trip generation will be. Same thing with commercial or office. They're uniform. Campuses and institutions are not that way at all. Campuses, for example, a new building, I used to do master plans sometimes for institutions when I was in the private sector, and every time they would come with a development plan, a development proposal, they would usually have some idea about whether something was intended to accommodate growth or if it was to enhance specific services. So they may just be expanding their library. That's not necessarily going to bring a lot of new trips, but if they're going to have a new science building with a new program, a new academic program, that will be perhaps new trips. Also, each individual institution has different characteristics based on where it is and the kind of services it provides. So, for example, the difference between Reed College and Portland Community College. Reed College has almost all full-time students, many of whom live on campus or nearby. Portland Community College has a lot of part-time who may be going to multiple campuses and working elsewhere. So it's very difficult to, in fact, it's not really viable to simply put a blanket land use type on campus and institution zones. So because of that, what we know that is frustrating and challenging to the development stakeholder, the institutions themselves, is that with a custom TDM plan, it can be uncertain and it can cause delays because they are custom. The evaluation plan has seemed to be subjective. PBOT has in the past few years developed some guidelines that might help that, but again, that adds to uncertainty. And they have to do the traffic impact analysis, and so intersection capacity issues, even while they're doing all the good things in transportation demand management, can still become a burden or a barrier to their development goals. So these are what is frustrating to them now that they were hoping to get some relief from with the new zone. In the proposed draft from December, what we also heard, these are some of the questions that we heard in a couple different stakeholder meetings as well as testimony that you received, wanting to make sure that they're not going to be asked to toss out. There wasn't clarity about, are we going to have to toss out the current TDM plan? What if it's already working? What is the performance target? Some of these issues I'll just skip here and say that these are some of the major changes we made based on those earlier comments. We had to clarify the performance targets for this requirement would be in the transportation system plan, so not something subject to easy change by staff. We clarified that an interim performance target would be simply a straight line method from the base year to the horizon year. These were just things to help take away some of that uncertainty. We did add a provision that institutions could propose their own modified performance target if they felt that their area shouldn't be held to meet the citywide or the pattern area target. And then there was a clarification that failing to achieve the mode split target was not subject to enforcement. It was failure to follow through on an agreement was the only enforcement. So those were some clarifications. And so we met in February and March. And then we heard additional questions and so came back last week and specifically wanted to identify these areas, these 4 areas again, just to help remove some of the uncertainty and the risk and the possible delays. That was our objective. One was to, again, clarify that any current approved TDM plan is the baseline. It is the starting point. Nothing has to be tossed out, especially if it's working. We needed to clarify that the trigger for review or an update would be in Title 33, those development thresholds there. The evaluation process, one of the things we added was to require an early assistance meeting at the beginning of their development process. Those are valuable for the traffic impact analysis, and they usually should do it because then they'll find out what the scope of their traffic impact analysis would be. But they could also have their past TDM performance reviewed, and we would like to provide a type 1 process for the very highest performers. The idea being that will If they can have that in a type 1 review, it removes a lot of the uncertainty and delay, but it also is an incentive for them to do really well. And so those would be the institutions that are in fact on track to meet the performance targets for the mode split targets for their area. And the other area that I think was of concern was knowing that this was intended to be, I think we called it an adaptive TDM plan, so that moving forward there would need to be possible changes if they're not performing and on track to meet the target. We began developing and are still working on a best practices summary of, we have the TDM plans for all these institutions. We have the reports on what their performance has been, and we are able to see, I didn't bring it, it's still not very easy to look at, but it's, it's just a big matrix of what they're all doing, how they're performing, and you can see there that some of the best performers perhaps are already providing transit, 50% transit subsidies to half of their population and charging for parking. So that would mean that would inform a future increase strategy that, well, you need to just either increase the population that's getting the subsidy or increase the amount of the subsidy. It's not something that's intended to be deterministic, but something to show that we can look at best practices and we can use that to inform that future decision together. So we began that process and had a meeting last week with some stakeholders. And at that meeting, I had a little advance notice it was coming, but I didn't get it until that day, which was Tuesday. We were provided with a counter, well, I guess their proposal, which was signed on to by several of the institutions, Providence, Portland Community College, Lewis and Clark. I can't remember them all. It's not intended to be a consensus, so it doesn't represent all of them, but it was a really good proposal. It had some very good ideas. One big difference was that it established a 2-year check-in and a 4-year rolling approval process for the TDM plans to be administered by the Bureau of Transportation. We like that because that would make it a more effective TDM plan because you're kind of revisiting it more often. They like it because it would be administered separate from the land use process, and so as they're needing to make changes and updates, they're not getting held up in their land use. It also included a good consideration of multimodal performance measures, and also neighborhood participation that seemed to be on track with what we have, but we haven't had a chance yet to really get together and make sure that that they are aligned and that we are meeting our requirements. But it was a really solid proposal. So what we would like to do with them is spend some time working with them to see if we can pull the best ideas from both. We have to make what we've identified so far as things that we really need to be looking for, and I'll look for feedback from you on that. So we need to make sure that we do have a clear connection to the land use approvals. So it could be that that rolling 4-year approval simply lets them be certified or something like that. We have to figure that out. They didn't have a proposal for that part, but they recognized it needed to be there. One of the issues with level of service or other traffic mitigations is we would like to provide an opportunity, and I think the code on the mixed use zone already begins to that option of letting TDM strategies be a potential mitigation for what are typically congestion issues. So in the past, we've always had to deal with capacity whenever we had a failed intersection, but we're trying to expand that so that we can think more about the system instead of just a point in space and a point in time, which is what intersection level of service does. So we want to make sure that we keep that that strategy in place.
Judith, how would that tie into the new performance measures that are coming in stage 3 of the TSP? I mean, LOS is probably not the right metric, right? So we don't know what the metric is yet. How do we tie into it?
I don't know. I can't say right now. I'd have to make it up. Would you like me to? What we know is there's the concept is this, and this has been a frustration of mine for a long, long time, and right now the Oregon Department of Transportation is ahead of us on providing an opportunity where if an intersection is failing to meet the performance measure, but for some list of reasons, it's either cost prohibitive, contrary to other design goals or other objectives, so certain reasons that we really don't want added turn lanes or anything like that, we don't want to expand the capacity, is there a way that the developer or the applicant can provide a mitigation to the system? And so the transportation planning rule now includes that provision, and we don't. And so what we want to do is, this is an opportunity for us to provide that, and because the performance targets that they provided, as well as what we had in our draft, just kind of does a better job of listing out, you know, you want to make sure you have a continuous connection for bikes and walking. And if you don't, then maybe instead of focusing so much attention on that $13 million intersection expansion, we could just add some sidewalks. And those sometimes can be done, but we're trying to provide some more guidance so that it's a little less objective, but we're getting stronger that way, and I think it definitely matches our values and what we need. So that's kind of a long answer because I'm really interested in the topic. But that's where we're trying to go with this policy as well. It is by its very nature less clear. So anyway, multimodal performance targets, neighborhood participation, those were things that they included in theirs, which I really appreciated. It showed it a really a good intention aligned with our intentions as well. So
The dilemma with, you know, the campus proposal being a rolling thing that's outside of land use is we just need to do a little more work to figure out how it connects to land use.
As you've been talking this afternoon, I was just reflecting on some of the experiences I had working in health and trying to improve appropriate utilization and decreased inappropriate utilization. And so my question is, do you have any behavioral science people working with you on this? Because my experience in health is that smart people like me who were physicians would sit around and talk about why and how people change their behavior, and we had no idea what we were talking about. But there are people out there who actually do know about that, and ultimately it's a human who drives a car. And so changing that person's behavior or a population of those person's behaviors becomes really important, and just something you might think about.
thank you.
So we had penciled in an August 2nd date for continuation of this, and that was a contingency before, and I think we're going to try and use that contingency to continue the discussion on the campuses because we need that more time to consolidate the different options that are now on the table.
If I could understand your process on that, you know, a concern I had that ultimately led me to vote against the campus proposal was that, you know, we got to public hearing and both sides told us they didn't like it. And we then spent a lot of time making it more attractive to the institutions and didn't do much for the neighborhoods, right? So here, again, we've got ideas from the institutional stakeholders to further modify it, which, you know, frankly, all seem pretty reasonable to me. But somewhere before August 2nd, are you going to have an opportunity for the neighborhoods to give input on this so that we get a balanced view when we come back on August 2nd?
So I want to clarify, well, yes. Also, I'm not entirely certain that we'll come back with, so August 2nd was a placeholder we put in to update you on TDM in general. If we are able to iron this out by August 2nd, that's great. I'm not certain yet because I haven't had my first follow-up meeting, and when we start looking at schedules, we'll, you know, we can come back and do an update for you if that's what you wish. I just will tell you, we haven't ironed out that process of what it's going to take. However, whatever it does take, and at the past stakeholder meetings we've had, neighborhood representatives have been there as well, and we can make sure it's one of the things that we have to make sure that they have a part of.
I had the same concern about neighborhoods. It seemed driven by the institutions and not neighborhood representation. So I would hope that occurs. The other thing is, I'm not clear how low performers advance without a tie to the land use process. And I like the every 2 years and kind of 4-year rolling, but especially the bigger some of these institutions are building almost constantly and have 10-year plans. And we heard that in testimony. How do we get low performers up so that people are in the best practices realm? And I didn't see a trigger that says you can't move ahead without increasing your performance.
This is the piece we still have more discussion that we need to do, but just having thought a little bit about it since we just got the proposal last week, probably there's something in Title 33 that says you have to have a valid, currently certified TDM plan. That would be one of the Title 33 standards. Just because this TDM thing is a separate process wouldn't mean that you wouldn't be able to consider what it is during the land use review process, because we still have a land use review for the transportation impacts above a certain threshold. And so high performers are going to have an easier time with that because they'll be generating less trips. And so it does kind of, probably it circles back to the land use, just in the sense that although the land use isn't how you get your TDM plan approved, its contents are certainly information that can be brought to bear to the land use in terms of what other mitigation may or may not be required. And so that piece needs more thinking, but that's a off the top of my head kind of response.
The thing is, they're 4-year rolling reviews. They just separate it from land use in terms of the timing. I don't think that we have to separate it from land use in terms of the requirement for approval. And so some developers, some institutions would just prefer that, because that way they don't have to come in when they're ready to develop, when they're ready for that new development plan, and then be hung up while they're trying to update, get their TDM plan approved. We also have to remember, including myself, this was brought by some of the institutions. And I think that the highest performing institutions who are already accustomed to investing and having really smart TDM plans like this the most. So it could be that there are some who don't. It's not just the neighborhood. So they are new good ideas that we'd like to fully vet. But usually the only teeth that we do have is around the land use approval, so I don't think we can separate it. And while they didn't explicitly propose something, they sort of nodded. Without mentioning names, yes, of course we'll have to attach it to land. That's understood, I think.
Okay. I was concerned it seemed like they were trying to separate it out. And
the way it works in some communities is that the TDM plan establishes kind of a trip number that you're certified for, and then the development review kind of churns along as long as you're within that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or input for Judith as they kind of proceed with that you'd like her to keep in mind, or the team to keep in mind?
I heard the neighborhood part loud and clear. That's good.
Great. Well, I think that's it then.
Okay.
With that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
I think. Oh, street vacation. Sorry.
Gotta go. Sorry.
So sorry. It's nothing personal. I was just trying to hit my goal of finishing a meeting an hour early.
It's cold. I thought everybody was just putting on their jackets because it's
Sorry,
cold in
Courtney.
here. It's okay. So I'm Courtney Duke with the Bureau of Transportation, and I don't have a PowerPoint. So can I shut that so we don't have to see it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Okay. I'm just following up on a memo that I sent out to all of you. I think Julie sent it out early last week. So I'm just going to work from the memo rather than a presentation. I think it's pretty short. The main reason that we're here is I know Commissioner Rudd had some questions about adding the community uses to Title 17. So what we're really focusing on today is the Title 17 language that we had brought in and had proposed in December 2015. And so the memo, just to summarize, if you weren't able to read it, and that's fine, and just to have it in the record, we modified the street vacation policy in the comprehensive plan in Chapter 8, which is the public facilities chapter. So policy 8.48 was modified. And we also have new right-of-way policies, which are policies 8.38 through 8.43. These were modified by you, the Planning Commission, as part of the recommended draft in 2015. Included in this draft were uses of the right-of-way, including community uses, which is policy 8.42. So based on this addition, the policy for street vacations, 8.48, which I think I attached, but maybe I didn't, sorry, was recommended both by City Council and PBOT staff to include community uses when considering street vacations. So the Title 17 and approval criteria proposed in December reflected that change. So that's what you saw in December. So City Council voted on May 12th to incorporate these changes to the right-of-way and the street vacation policies, which gave us more official direction in the Title 17 changes to include community uses. So again, that's what's attached. Commissioner Rudd has expressed concern about the policy changes, including community uses. Again, I think our main point is that City Council will vote tomorrow to include community uses in that policy statement. So we feel that we need to keep the Title 17 language as proposed to implement what the council has proposed. We did make some minor changes based on some conversations with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff and our right-of-way staff. If you see on the attached that we took out that council will use the decision-making for approval criteria and just made it more generic to approval criteria is as follows. That came from some discussions that all of you have had as to who actually will make ultimate decisions. You guys are making recommendations, so we didn't want to just say city council. At some point, it could possibly be a hearings officer if that's something that wanted to change in the future. So they just made it a little bit more flexible to just say approval criteria are, and then again in the second one, when approving or improving in part a street vacation, reservations or conditions may be made and listed these. So that's the only change. So our current proposal is still to have you adopt or recommend in the next draft to City Council that we continue to have the consider temporary community uses in the approval criteria and make the changes that it's more generic in terms of approval criteria are as follows. I think we obviously want to hear from Commissioner Rudd. I feel that if we make these changes, the council will make them back. So that's just my opinion. So that's.
So fighting a losing battle. I understand that my policy concerns don't appear to be shared by the council. I still sort of a fundamental value. I think that the primary purpose of the right-of-way is for transportation of a variety of means, and that if you have these community uses as an accessory use, then that makes sense. But otherwise, if it no longer serves any transportation use, I would rather see the property get vacated, go back on the tax rolls. Part of it for me is when you're developing property and you're required to do a dedication, it's got to be proportional to the burden you're putting on the system. And somehow down the road, not getting it back when it's being used for some completely different use doesn't strike me as fair. But council doesn't see it that way. That said, looking at the language itself, I think that temporary should be defined. You say temporary community uses, and that can be any length of time. I think community uses and public services aren't defined, so somebody applying the criteria, unless there's a definition somewhere, that's wide open. Nobody knows what it means. And criteria number 8, it talks about any other matter of like or different nature relating to the vacated area. To me, that means you can deny on any reason. That normally, if you say you can deny for X, Y, Z and similar reasons, at least there's some statutory interpretation provision that it's got to be like that other stuff. Here we're saying like or different. So this seems to me to say I can always say no to a vacation.
I think number 8 is actually related to putting conditions of approval on rather than approving or denying. If we can look at that together. So B is, we're looking at B8 on the second page.
Then I would say I still have the same.
Okay, that's fine. Just
concern
double
that-
checking.
yeah,
Okay,
that's
sure.
fine.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So
we could, so we can definitely make sure that we have temporary community uses defined both in the glossary and the zoning code. So we can check on that. And same, what was the other one was both
Community.
temporary and community or?
Community uses and public services, I
Public
don't think
services,
are
okay.
defined.
So Courtney, and I appreciate you may not have the definition sitting here, but do you have any idea what temporary community uses?
So some of the some of the so the main example that most people have been using, which we kept meaning to get a picture of, was there's something called the Sabin Orchard in Northeast Portland. So it's a grove of trees and orchard and fruit trees that are in the right of way currently. So if the property owners came to want to vacate that, the approval criteria says you need to at least consider that that is a use of the right-of-way and a community use when you're looking at the street vacation. Doesn't mean you have to keep it because of that, but consider it because, again, in the code, and I'm sorry, and in the policy, we've said that community uses are a use of the right-of-way. And again, that was a policy shift at the planning commission and city council level. Other community uses are community gardens have been put in the public right-of-way. Trying to think of other, there's not a lot of examples, but that.
Sure. I'll get more pointed. Street fair that happens every other year in that portion of the right-of-way.
I think that is something that you could be listed as a temporary community use, and if you were looking at a street vacation, either the applicant or petitioner or somebody opposed to it, or you could say, you know what, we think that's a valid need to keep the right-of-way and not vacate it. Or you say, it's only every other year, you know, it's more important to put it back to the property owners and put it back on the tax rolls. So, and I don't know if this is for sure, but I believe that almost all community uses must have a permit. So they are permitted. So that's another thing we could look at in the approval criteria is to see if it's a permitted community use. Just like any commercial use in the right-of-way is a permitted use. You have to get a permit to legally do it.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? And are you good trying to work with some of Michelle's incorporations?
Yeah, definitely in terms of the definitions in both the glossary and in the zoning code. Yeah, it's always better to have more clarity.
I did not appear.
And based on that, there was also no testimony about it at council from public or from planning commission or from staff.
And so, Courtney, are you needing or wanting a letter from us, or just kind of wanting to run this by us? What's
No,
your goal for today?
The goal was to try to have you approve the language so we can move forward to go to city council. Again, since we're coming back on August 2nd for TDM, we could look at some of those definitions and make sure things are incorporated prior to that. It's really up to you and what your comfort level is. Eric, are you here? We don't have council dates yet, do we? I'm just thinking in terms of our council dates, and that because, and again, I should know this better because I'm on the team, but the TDM stuff, what that needs to happen in Title 17 compared to what this has to go in Title 17 and has to go to city council, I think sooner rather than the TDM, but help me out.
The
partner.
first hearing at council is in late September. So finalizing it now or in August would be fine. Distinct from TDM, this is one where, even though it's in Title 17, because it's implementing the comp plan so directly, we felt like we needed your vote on this one.
Okay.
So I think if it's comfortable with everybody, I'd like to have your vote on these changes, but still have some recommendation from you that to work with Commissioner Rudd and others on the definitions in the zoning code and the comprehensive plans, just so we can move forward with our next documentation and getting all of there's a lot of production going into getting to city council, but it's what you're comfortable with.
I'm comfortable with that. Does somebody want to make a motion? Michelle, are you comfortable with that?
I'm going to vote no because I disagree with the
Okay.
underlying policy.
Well, there you go. Fair enough. So you're comfortable having a vote?
Not surprised, yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
So I move that we give conceptual approval to the code changes outlined in the PBOT memo of June 6th with the expectation that final code, including definitions, will be brought to us on August 2nd.
Second.
Any other comments, questions? If not, looks like Julie, go ahead and call the vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Courtney.
Sure, thank you.
Michelle. And with that, we're adjourned unless somebody wants to put something else on there.
So, Courtney, are you going to